don't care who likes it or not. As long as we know it's the truth. As long as we know it's the truth.
This gentleman that we today call the Prophet Muhammad, blessings on that brother's name. I have nothing but respect for all religions. I'm not going to play with people's feelings, okay, because we don't have time for that. Because every faith system comes out of Africa anyway. So you must respect the Bible, you must respect the Quran, you must respect the Kabbalah, whatever it is, comes out of our mind. So I have nothing but love and respect for our brothers and sisters, no matter what religion, no matter what you are. But we need to take it back a little bit further.
Okay.
Move beyond the concept of Kemet and go to Kush. And then you've got to understand that Kush is comprised of the countries we today call Puanit, which is Somalia, Djibouti, Eritrea, Ethiopia, Sudan, which was Nubia, and Kemet, which is Egypt. So that what you're dealing with is you're dealing with a Kushite empire. This Kushite empire flourishes coming up through the Great Lakes region, Uganda, Kenya, Tanzania. It rises up through, it starts to perfect itself, like Dr. Clark said, when Africans got their show together, then they took it on the road. And so what they did is these Africans traveled what might be called down north, which is going towards the north on Happy, and they bring with them this technology and this wisdom and this knowledge. They see this wisdom in the beginning, in the very early times of the human family. They see it almost like it's superstition. Superstition then becomes a science, and then the science of the superstition becomes spirituality. So what you have now, as it gets into Kemet and in Kush, you have a sacred science. Okay? Every faith system that is going to flourish out of this northeast corridor of the Happy. Islam, as we know it today, Islam was formed. See, I like to separate revelation from history. Revelation is what we talk about, God giving humanity a message. History is what actually happened historically. As an African people, we have to be able to separate myth from reality. Or what Dr. Diop and Dr. Clark say is the concept of taking and understanding the difference between spirituality and science. Science is seen spirituality, and spirituality is unseen science. So that when you look at it, it's two sides of the same coin, two sides of the same hide. One is leather, one is suede, but it comes off the same hide. And that's what sacred science is. So that when you get into concepts of Christianity and Judaism, that what we call it, you're dealing with Atanism coming out of Kemet, Kush. You're dealing with Aminism coming out of Kush, which is these countries in the northeast corridor. By the time you get into after the so-called Christian era, or once you get into the Piscean age, you're now dealing with concepts dealing with a people in Saudi Arabia, and there's something happening in the sister lodge in a place called Ma'at-Ka, which comes down to us as Mecca, where the ruling family of this, the scientists, the priests, kings, priestesses were living in Saudi Arabia in Ma'at-Ka, or Mecca, which was like a holy capital, sister lodge to the Grand Lodge, or the Ipet-is-Sut and Ipet of Karnak and Grand Lodge. But the bottom line is that the Prophet Muhammad, this individual, was going to make an advance on Ma'at-Ka or Mecca to take this family over and begin to run things the way he felt it should be run. He was repulsed the first try. He returned to Medina, where he was from, and he sent his second adopted son, Bilal, an African, into Ethiopia, and said, I want you to wait for my call to come back, and we're going to move on the city again. In time, the Prophet Muhammad got ready. He called his second adopted son, Bilal, back. Bilal returns with over 10,000, some say 30,000 Africans with a particular faith system coming up out of what we today call Abyssinia or Ethiopia. They come with a faith system. The evidence of it is that you do not have any religious figure, you do not have a Prophet Muhammad speaking anything about religion until after he gets into Ma'at-Ka, defeats the Holy Family, takes over Ma'at-Ka, and now he's going to unite people around this way of peace that is called Islam, that's coming out of the mountains of Ethiopia. Brought to him by these Africans, and the reason why Balal is what's called the Muzarine, or the caller to prayer, was because he was the one that called the Ethiopians into prayer to come in to help the prophet, his adopted father, take over Mecca or Ma'at-Ka. So it is an African faith system, but the so-called Eurasians, when the Prophet Muhammad died, Islam was broken along color lines. The Eurasians and the Africans who were the distinct descendants and who should have inherited Islam, believed that they should take the Prophet Muhammad's concepts and take it to the next level. The Eurasians that had been conquered, the mulatto children, they decided that they were going to do it. So there was a war, and it split. The Africans went Sunni, and the Eurasians went Shiite. So from the day the Prophet died, there was a problem in this African faith system, as the same with Christianity and Judaism.
Professor Walter Williams.
Yes, my brother.
Professor Walter Williams said Prophet Muhammad never existed.
Yes.
Dr. Ray Hagan says Prophet Muhammad never existed. Phil Valentine also make that claim, and Bobby Hemmett make that claim, that there was no such thing as Jesus, as Moses. None of the prophets of the Bible or the Quran ever existed.
Well, let me give it to you two ways. Let me give it to you out of respect for other people's religions and what they believe in. I don't know. I don't know. I wasn't there. So I can't say whether they existed or not. And until I am sure in what I am saying is difficult. Now let me tell you from where I'm coming from. I have never found a piece of evidence that ever showed that any of them ever existed. Akhenaten was Moses. Tutankhaten or Tutankhamun was Jesus, the son of Moses, the Messiah. Historically speaking, you see, what Eurasians do is they take our historical reality and they superimpose their own mythological revelation on top of it and then say it's real. So the idea of a Jesus the Christ existing is no evidence of this man. There's no evidence that he ever existed, that he ever did what he did, but there are evidences of priests, African priests, who had so adapted to the natural system of the Egyptian system, the Kemetic system, that they were able to perform. Look, if you go back 300 years, right, and you bring back those things that can bring back people's life, you know, you put them on the chest. Well, 300 years ago, if you could take those back into the past and have a man die in the middle of the street and then put them 2 pumps on someone's heart and then all of a sudden they come, you'd say that person was a miracle worker. The Egyptian priests were ahead of their time only because the Eurasians were behind the times. So the miracles that they say were created weren't really miracles. They were only the higher levels of consciousness that African folk had been in for hundreds of years. So that's the miracle worker. Africans have always been able to do
the body more than the European understood the body.
There's no doubt.
They understood the blood system and the blood flow in the body.
Yes.
Imhotep.
Yes.
The first doctor.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Well, you know something else? Imhotep, as we look at it, he probably is the first person that codified the medical knowledge.
Right.
But the medical knowledge was there for a long time.
Right,
What's interesting is
right.
that his papyrus that they said that he wrote today is called the Edwin Smith Papyrus. You can find the Edwin Smith Papyrus in the archives, because I studied it. You can find it in the archives at the New York Academy of Medicine on 104th Street and 5th Avenue. What's interesting about our ancestors is that when they wrote that book and evolved the human consciousness. They evolved the human book. They started the first part of the book starting with the head and they ended with the feet, because what they said is that the first problem you get medicinally, the first time you get sick, is what you think, and out of that everything else gets sick. So as you go through the chapters in the Edwin Smith Papyrus, what you see is that they started with how to keep the head right, and then at the end of the book they end with the feet. So they had a distinct way that they looked at the different systems. We have 14, what we call 14 systems in our body. We have the respiratory system, the endocrine system, circulatory system, nervous system, digest, all that. The way the Africans did it is that they didn't approach it through that. They approached it from head top to shoe stop. And so when you did it that way, you healed yourself first with what you thought, and then everything else came through that. A genius way of doing it, man. The ancestors were brilliant, man.
Where do the Moors fit into our history? Because you know it's been this beef going on about the Moors come out of Egypt. We are not black. Where do the Moors fit into Egypt, ancient Egypt? At the time of building the Great Pyramids, was our people calling themselves Moors, and where did that word come from?
Well, Moor means black.
Okay.
Okay.
Now, Moors will argue with you about that.
Moor means black. Moor is deeply steeped in the Greek tradition.
You heard what he said? Moor
and in the Roman tradition. Moor means black.
But I was just saying, Moors will argue with you over that.
You know, and we can, as long as we respect each other, I don't mind talking. But I think that we have to, as Dr. Leonard Jeffries tells us, we have got to stop the paralysis in the analysis, and we have to get scientific with what we're saying, so that people who are watching us and observing us talking about ourselves understand that we are taking it from an analysis that will take both the good and the not so good and come to grips with it. Moor means black. Ethiopia means burnt face. Negro means black. In terms of the languages that people, because obviously black folk didn't call themselves black because they were the only ones around. So who did they have themselves to compare themselves with?
That's right.
So people coming from the outside who were not black had to have called them black as opposed to their pale face or their middle face or their mulatto face. So that we did not, just like I argue with folk, there's no such thing as an African-centered curriculum. The reason why we call it an African-centered curriculum is because other people of other cultures stole our legacy, put their name on it. So for us to return back to our legacy, we have to say it's African-centered. But when African people developed a curriculum and taught their children, they did not spend any moments trying to say this is for African children, because the only children they were teaching were African. So why would they call it an African-centered curriculum when, first of all, we don't even know if that's the word they use, such as Africa. But why would they? Because when they did it from a Ma'atian mind, a universal mind, a mind that could accept information. When Eurasians took it, they dirtied it. And they contaminated it because they did not have the intellectual enzymes to digest the intellectual meal that the Africans were dropping on them. So they regurgitated it. And what our children are experiencing in these classrooms is European vomit because they didn't understand it in the first place.
Let me ask a question. Would you say that the Eurasian approached the knowledge in a sophist way, meaning that they really didn't understand the teachings and the knowledge, they just repeated what they heard?
It appears that the ones that...
Because it seems like they never evolved on anything. They didn't add on to anything. If you have an understanding of something, then you can make it better and add on. It doesn't seem like, you know, this knowledge that they took over now feeding back to us has evolved anyway from when they first got it.
No, it hasn't evolved. In fact, it has regressed and not progressed.
Right.
Because the fact that the fact that we would be in a society now where we're paying more for bread, more for food, more for everything, more for transportation, the fact that this society is destructing instead of constructing is evidence that they did not take it to the next level and they did not have the capacity to. And that is why when you look at what's happening now, a lot of folk depend on African folk. I often say they'll never get rid of us, because if they ever got rid of us, where would they get their next idea from? So they're not going to get rid of us. But the thing is that it appears from what they did, such as Pythagoras. See, his name wasn't Pythagoras. His name was Pythagoras. P-T-A-H. They changed it to Pythagoras. Euclid. Well, Euclid was an African. Socrates. All of them. These were either Africans or Eurasians impacted by Africans. Yes, Socrates was in North Africa.
It was Greek.
Yeah.
No, but there's no such thing as a Greek. Greek don't exist. But Greek don't exist like African Americans don't exist. African Americans, Puerto Rican, Dominican, all that is made up. That's all a way that we can at least have a point of departure for where we come from.
All right, you ready for this controversial question?
Oh yeah.
Let me ask him one more question before you go. Once we get through all the is it this or is it that, is it this or is it that, how do we use religion, right? Or do we need religion as a part of our culture for us to progress economically, politically, and socially amongst black people? Does religion play a part? Do we need religion? Or is it a hindrance to us right now?
It's according to how you use it. See, it's never what it is. It's how you use it.
Christians and Muslims should never be at war with one another. Christians and Muslims should walk the path of Christ and Muhammad as brothers.